Okay, so we now welcome on the Power of the Towel podcast for the Nucks Misconduct Network. You know her as the host of Sportsnet's hockey coverage. If you watched the game Thursday night, she was front and center. It's Carolyn Cameron. Carolyn, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. And the first question I have is, you are, by my estimation, the fourth person on this podcast to have their own Wikipedia page. And I always have to ask this question when I have someone on who has their own Wikipedia page. How true is this thing?
I don't know. I would have to look it up. Do you want me to?
Yeah, if I had my own Wikipedia page, I'd be constantly checking it to see like how accurate this thing is.
Because I don't want to say it's accurate if there's libel or something. That's my birthday, which is weird. I went to Western and Fanshawe. I don't know if it mentions that. Yep. I wonder if our PR department does this.
You think so? You think there's someone inside Sportsnet who...
I'm not sure. I would actually have to ask.
So they have your birthday. You have your exact birthday.
Accurate.
That's very...
Oh, no, it's not. It says I was born in Vancouver.
No, it's fake news.
Nope, that's not true. The work did not do this.
Okay. So
I was born in Toronto. I lived in Vancouver.
Yeah, of course, and we'll get to that eventually. So, like, for the Wikipedia page, so you're not going to go edit it right now? Not going to stop this interview and?
No, it's okay. I'm just going to let it live.
Okay, no, that's a good healthy attitude to have, I think.
I feel like if you edit it once, then you're going down a dark road of continuing to do that.
Absolutely. So let's start with some Scotia North Division talk. What are your thoughts on the Scotia North Division so far? Because I love it personally. I could go for this all the rest of the way.
It's been awesome so far. And I was trying to think even just this morning when I was prepping for tonight's show, is it that I was just so desperate for hockey to come back, that I was so excited for this Canadian division, that it's not even as good as I think it is? But then even just rewatching some highlights, I think it's just been awesome. Mm-hmm. Like Toronto, Montreal to start it all off, that was great. And I always love when you see someone new to the team too, like Josh Anderson. He really stood out and looked fast, fit in there. And Montreal, by the way, they're going to be the annoying team in this division. Teams are not going to like them, and they're going to cause trouble for tons of teams. And the reason I say it's annoying is because other teams, they're just a little bit sexier. Like they have the big names. They have the Connor McDavid. They have the Austin Matthews. They have the Patrick Laine and Scheifele and Pettersson. But Montreal, they'll grind you down, and they're skilled and they're annoying. So, I mean, that was great. Vancouver looks awesome. And I love how, like, within 2 nights, we get to see 2 matchups between the Oilers and the Canucks. Mm-hmm. I think it looks really good. And Patrick Laine, like, got the elephant. He is the elephant in the room.
Oh, yeah.
And already he's kind of said with his play, let's stop talking about that and focus on what I'm doing on the ice. So I think it's been awesome. Battle of Alberta is tonight. And I think even the Ottawa Senators, even though they're going to finish last in the division, they're going to have good storylines. And I'm excited to see Tim Stützle make his NHL debut.
Yes, and I think honestly every game in this Scotia North Division is going to end up like 5-4, 30 high danger scoring chances on each end. Like, it's going to be exciting hockey. I can't see one team literally trying to old school trap it up and just try and defend. Like, even a team like Ottawa, like, yeah, they're probably going to finish last in the division, but their games are still going to be exciting in the way there's going to be lots of goals.
Yeah, and a part of that, though, I think right now, because even across the league, it's been high scoring. I think it just goes to show what happens to goaltenders when they don't get preseason games. So I think that's a little bit of it. But I'm, like, as a fan, I love to see the offense and high scoring games. I think it's good for the league. I think it's good for TV. I think it just makes the game better. But you're right. There's so many offensive threats throughout the league. It's not like we've got an Islanders-like team who's just shut down, which ironically in their opener, they were the high scorers and the Rangers weren't able to get anything in. But yeah, I think it'll be a high scoring season. Hopefully you just have so many talented goal scorers in the North.
Yeah. Connor McDavid, Elias Pettersson, Patrick Laine, Austin Matthews. There's so much good, like, young talent. And obviously it's benefited that all these teams kind of sucked at around the same time. Like, I'm thinking back to 2016, right? Like, The,
You're right.
the Canucks had the fifth pick, but there was a ton of Canadian teams around that top five as well. Obviously, the Leafs had the first pick, Jets had the second, and it just goes to show, like, at the time, I remember there was like think pieces like, oh my God, what's Sportsnet gonna do like right now? Like all these Canadian teams suck. They paid way too much money, and maybe they just have to wait it out a bit. Maybe it was just it was a natural cycle of all these Canadian teams sucking around the same time, and now all these teams seem like they're on the come up.
You are right. If there was a year to have an all-Canadian division, this is the year. I hadn't thought about it like that. I mean, we're actually spoiled that the teams are so good and are so skilled, I think, too. Because it's this year, because they're just playing each other and there's only 7 teams, it's not even about wins and losses. It's about being entertaining. Like, you need to have entertainment value if you're seeing like the Jets and Flames play 9 times. If they were 2 boring teams, that would suck.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is I just think that people will not get tired of these matchups. Like I was thinking before the season, like, are people gonna get sick of seeing Canucks Oilers 10 times a year? Am I gonna get sick of that? I haven't got sick of it yet. Like, again, it's only been 2 games in, but I don't think I'll get sick of seeing like Connor McDavid versus Elias Pettersson 10 times a season. That's not a bad hockey to me.
I personally like to, and as a baseball fan, I've always liked series.
Mm-hmm.
So I like how we can see how a team adjusts the next night or 2 nights later to play the same team. I don't think we'll get tired of it as fans. Like, usually in the NHL season in a regular year, it's around January with the All-Star break creeping up, where it's kind of like the dog days of the season where you're thinking, okay, let's switch things up. I think because it's a 56-game sprint, we're not really going to get there. And I think the newer rivalries will also freshen up that space and our viewpoint. Because everyone talks about Toronto, Montreal, or the Battle of Ontario, Battle of Alberta. Like, I'm excited for Leafs Canucks, right? I want to see Elias Pettersson get under Austin Matthews' skin and Quinn Hughes going up against Morgan Riley. Like, I think it's going to be rivalries like that. I think will help us throughout the season. I also think this is a really good opportunity for certain stars to shine, because we've already mentioned McDavid, Pettersson, Matthews tons of times already in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But even last night on Thursday in the game between the Flames and Jets, like, there's Matthew Tkachuk, who gets a ton of attention out west and in Calgary, but he's going to get more attention across the country. I think Mark Scheifele, as Paul Maurice alluded to, is going to step into the spotlight. I think it gives the players a good amount of motivation. It's always there, but I think the fact that they can really shine this year in Canada is going to work to their benefit, and then our benefit watching them.
And look, I've said this on my podcast before. My goal for this season for the Vancouver Canucks is to beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in the first round and have the Vancouver Canucks hand the Leafs their annual first round L. I don't care. Anything could happen the rest of the way. I could care less. It could be a 1-4 matchup, 2-3, 3-2. Doesn't matter. As long as the Vancouver Canucks beat the Leafs in the first round, trust me, that'll make me so happy. That'll make so many people out here in Vancouver happy. And I know you used to work out here in Vancouver. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, I get it. See, I miss, because I'm in Toronto now, I miss living in Vancouver for even watching hockey. Because I know people hate when it's the 4 p.m.
The absolute worst.
For the one time a year that they're in Toronto.
Yeah.
But otherwise, when the Leafs are actually in Vancouver and it's 4 p.m.
And it's happening again this year. Surprise, surprise.
I know. But I miss the 4 p.m. hockey night. 4 p.m. is the first game, and then 7 o'clock is the second game, and then you still have the whole night.
Yeah, we are very spoiled here on the West Coast for sports watching, because I can't imagine. I remember I was in a student journalism conference out in Toronto. This was back in 2016. I remember this was around the same time the Leafs went on their annual California road trip, right? So I remember coming back to my hotel after a night of drinking, and it's 12 midnight, and there's a live hockey game going on. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? This is so foreign, so weird. Like, what the hell's going on?
I know. I miss living in Vancouver and watching sports selfishly for my sleep.
Yeah. Let's get into that. So you used to work, you used to live here in Vancouver. You used to work here in Vancouver for Sportsnet. James Cybulski, right? You used to host a show with James Cybulski. What was that experience like? Because I've had James Cybulski on this show before. Absolutely great guy. Like, what was he like to work with, and what was it like to have a local, sports show out here in Vancouver? Because that's been missing for a number of years now out here. Is a local sports show. Obviously, before you guys, we had Don Taylor, legendary sportscaster out here. But since you and James Cybulski kind of parted ways, so to say, you went back to Toronto, there hasn't really been that voice here in the market.
Yeah. So even just to kind of put things into context, so that was 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I moved out there to 2016. And when I moved out there, that was still pretty early on in my career because I was 23, about to turn 24. And I was pretty nervous because I'd anchored before. I'd done a lot of reporting and I'd anchored, but I was just filling in Toronto for Martin Geyer's mat leave. So I hadn't done a ton of anchoring. So they asked if I want to move to Vancouver and work with James Cybulski, who I'd only met maybe a couple of times, and do the national morning show from Vancouver. Now, Don was still doing the 10 o'clock Pacific show. I don't remember for how long when I was still there. So I feel grateful that I didn't work with him on air, but I got to work in the same room with him.
Guy's an absolute legend out here.
Oh, he's such a legend. And working with Seaball was great. Like, he was so helpful to me in terms of me getting my reps and just looking out for me and being helpful. And he just, because I moved out there and didn't know anyone, and just the situation with work kind of being thrown onto the national level, it could have been very overwhelming. And Seaball and Dan Chomiak too, who I worked with there, and Craig Cheeseman, behind the scenes, like, they honestly became kind of like family. And even to this day, like, Seaball I consider kind of like a big brother or annoying uncle. It kind of depends on
the fun uncle.
Day. Yeah, fun uncle. Sorry, did I say annoying?
You said well, maybe he's annoying. I don't know. Probably better than me.
He's great. Like, chatty guy, funny guy, loves his job. Yeah, was made for radio, as I like to tell him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's got a voice for it. That's why he's on the NHL video games. Have you ever thought that maybe if you stay in Vancouver, you spend a few more years, you're on NHL, you're on NHL 20, you're maybe doing some of that stuff. Maybe you're going down with James Cybulski down to California to hang out with Snoop Dogg and spark it up with the Deal Double G.
He told me about that, and I think he said Snoop Dogg was wearing a robe.
Yeah, he's Snoop Dogg. Like, why?
That sounds very common. Why would you not? Why not be comfortable?
Yeah, exactly. He's Snoop Dogg. Like, if he's offering you to smoke up with him, what are you gonna do? Say no? You don't want to be that guy.
I think that's one of the cool. Seaball's done a lot of cool things in his career, but I think that being the voice of a video game is pretty darn cool.
Yeah, and like we had him on the podcast, and I think half the interview was just me asking questions about Snoop Dogg. just me asking, like, what was he like? What was his posse like? What was his crew like? Was Dr. Dre there? All this. I couldn't get over the fact.
Stewart there.
It was Maria. Yeah, they're best friends. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah, they're. It's just such a cool.
She was not.
No, she. I doubted it, but no. I just remember, here at the studio we play NHL a lot, and to hear James Cybulski and to have him on the podcast was a very cool experience. But what do you most miss about Vancouver?
I miss the city in terms of just living there. Like, outside of work and the people, I miss the city. It really suited me, even though I was born and raised in Toronto. I'm very outdoorsy and I like being active. And even the hours I worked in Vancouver, we would get into work at 6 p.m. So I had the entire day. Like, I'd go skiing sometimes and go up to Cypress or Grouse and just go skiing during the day, or a bike ride around the seawall because I lived right downtown. Like, it was a good life. It was a nice life.
My mom was born here in the Lower Mainland, but she grew up in Southern Ontario, in a town called Uxbridge, just kind of like Southern Ontario. If you know the area, And she says, like, the winters sucked. Like, the winters are absolutely brutal, and she does not.
In Ontario,
yeah. She does not miss the winters.
Actually. Yeah, this winter's been good. Thankfully, we got something good in the past year. It's been pretty mild, but even when I was in Vancouver for those 2 years, I feel like I had good Vancouver winters. It didn't even seem that rainy. I think I was just wearing rose-colored glasses.
I think you get used to it after a while. You get desensitized. True. Like, I've lived here all my life. You just write off, November to February. It's gonna rain, 80% of the time. Just gotta deal with it. But for the summer, when it does come, it makes it all worth it, in my opinion.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And just having like anytime I felt stressed or homesick or anything, I would just like walk 3 minutes to the seawall and feel fine because it's the ocean. It's relaxing.
Will Sportsnet ever have, another regional show back here? Is that happening? Is that going to happen soon?
That's a good question. I was thinking about it too when you were asking me about that, and I forgot to mention it. So because when I got there and Dawn was still doing the 10 o'clock show, that was really the last show on Sportsnet that was regional. Mm-hmm. And Sportsnet originally started as a regional network. And I believe, but don't quote me, that was for CRTC regulations in order to get on air. But I might have it.
I'll take your word for it. You're a national host.
So will it ever go back to that? I doubt it, just because of money.
Yeah.
Right? Like, unfortunately, if you think about it, why have 4 different Sportsnet Centrals in a night when you can really just focus on a few out of games? That's why I do enjoy doing the regional, and I just have one segment of the intermissions, but I enjoy doing the regionals for Flames, Canucks, and Oilers, because you still feel like it's just different than national. It feels a little more like homey. If that makes
intimate.
Sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get a bit more hockey talk. McDavid versus Pettersson. Mm-hmm. Who's better? This has been the
McDavid.
talk. No hesitation.
I know it's a Canucks podcast, but McDavid is by far the greatest player on earth.
I'm just messing with you. I do agree. McDavid is probably he definitely is the better player. Yeah. Like, hey, we just watched him dominate the Canucks last night. 3 goals, that one goal where he just like stopped on a dime, top shelf. Like Pettersson's a very, very good player, and I think he's a better two-way player than McDavid, if you can believe it. Like, the way he can dominate a game defensively is very underrated, in my opinion. But if you have the skill of McDavid, you can just score a hat trick and you do all the defensive battling you want. It's really not going to matter. You're down 3 goals.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that's something that McDavid was working on this offseason too when he was in Arizona. It was some of his defensive play.
Yeah.
Because that's where he has been questioned in his career. Yeah, Elias Pettersson, he's got the I hate when people say hockey IQ. What's another way to say it? Like, he's got the
We're fine with cliches on this podcast. You can just say like the hockey IQ.
I know, there's just so many. Like, Elias Pettersson is so skilled. He's personally one of my favorite players.
Damn right.
To watch. And he's getting better at knowing how to use his body too. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a kid who grows into a teenager, as you kind of figure out like what you have and your space, right? Like how to use it. But yeah, McDavid's just like otherworldly. We were even talking last night at work when I was working with Jennifer Botterill. There's this book I read a few years ago called The Sport Gene, and it helps explain why there are some athletes, like in the NHL, you have the greatest hockey players in the world. So they're all around the same skill level. Mm-hmm. And then yet you still have one person really right now, McDavid, who is above the rest. Can skate faster than anyone. Yeah. I know Barzal won the fastest skater at the All-Star game. But
McDavid's faster.
In a
game speed.
Yeah. Like, it's unbelievable what he's capable of doing that nobody else is capable of doing, no matter how hard they try.
Yeah, and again, McDavid's going to be a problem for the entire Scotia North Division.
Oh yeah,
he's going to be over easily a point a game in this division, and I think that's another thing people are sort of underestimating when they try to handicap the season. Is some divisions, just because of you playing 10 teams, 9 teams, are going to be higher scoring. I'm not going to be surprised if the Scotia North Division is the highest scoring division in the NHL by the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I think that's a fair assessment. I was actually just thinking too, the interesting thing about the Oilers, and yes, they've gotten deeper and a little bit better defensively, and we did see that in game 2 against the Canucks, is when McDavid's not on the ice, there is a drop-off, a noticeable drop-off. I don't know if you find that. I found it in game 2 against the Canucks.
Well, the Oilers are the ultimate experiment in trying to create an NBA roster on an NHL team. Like, they have like 2 of the best players on earth in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and there's a big drop-off after that. And the question is, I read a book about, the strong link versus weak link in terms of like, can the best players in hockey carry like they do in the NBA. And maybe the Oilers this season are going to answer that question. Can their two best players carry that team? Because outside of those two, Brian Nugent-Hopkins, maybe like that. He's
looked good thus far.
He's good. Yeah, he's been
Small sample size, but he's looked good.
He's been okay, but like, can those two carry the Oilers to a deep playoff run like you would expect a team with McDavid and Draisaitl? I don't know, but this is a Canucks podcast. Enough Oiler talk. Niels Höglander, will you be nominating him for the Calder? Yes or no?
I don't know. My original pick for the Calder, I'm not giving very good analysis on a Canucks podcast. People are going to hate me. My original pick for the Calder is Kirill Kaprizov, who we saw.
Isn't he like 24?
Debut?
Isn't he 20? Yeah. He's 24.
So I'm kind of cheating because he's an old rookie.
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised if Niels Höglander, if he stays on the line he's on and keeps getting opportunities from Travis Green, which I don't see why he's not going to, if he would be up near the top. Like, that's where the Canucks are just so spoiled, and it's from their own doing in terms of draft picks and drafting well in the past, really even 6 years, is like, once again, if you're anywhere else in the league and even in the Scotia North Division, you're looking at Vancouver and you're thinking again you have another great rookie. Like it's it's Besser, and then it's Pettersson, then it's Hughes, and now it's Höglander. Like it's actually unbelievable. Yeah. And they all are so good and so different and so skilled.
And what makes it
I think he looks good, and I like even on Thursday night, like, he has good positioning.
Yes.
I like seeing him kind of get to the dirty areas and get right in front of the net. Like, I think he's a smart player.
Yeah, and hopefully they can get JT Miller back so he can stay on that Bo Horvat line, because I think that's his best fit is with Bo Horvat. Now, JT.
Can I just say too, Bo Horvat to me is the most underrated captain in the NHL.
Oh, okay, I like this.
Yeah, like, he does not get enough credit at all, and I think luckily in the playoffs people saw more from him on a bigger stage, and more people were watching, especially in the bubble. Mm-hmm. But what he does for that Canucks team, and just, it doesn't always show on the score sheet, but how hard a worker he is and how he just always gives it. I love him. I think he's great and a great leader.
Yeah.
He's
and
so modest and just wants to win, right? And other guys to be good.
And we had Dan Murphy on last week's episode to kind of preview the season. And I think putting Niels Höglander on that line with Bo Horvat is kind of an admission by Travis Green that I think why he's underrated is he's kind of been a shutdown guy for the Canucks. As long as Travis Green's been there, he's been used as the shutdown guy. And you kind of saw it in the bubble. He was kind of using a more offensive role. But yeah, I think Bo Horvat's going to have a kind of a quote-unquote breakout season for the rest of the league, because he's not going to have those tough defensive duties. Like with Höglander, it's, okay, those top two lines are going to have to score. And those bottom two lines, just don't try and screw up and don't get scored on.
Shut her down.
Yeah.
That's one of the issues, though, within the NHL, is that stardom and attention always goes to goal scorers. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't even go to it's even goal scorers over like playmaking. And so a guy like Horvat, who, as I said, is doing things that don't always show up on the score sheet, they just get overlooked. And that's something that kind of, I mean, I guess it's like that. And I'm trying to think, it's kind of like that in every league. But I mean, think about the Norris.
Yeah.
Like,
it usually goes the guy with the most points.
It's the best offensive defenseman, but that's who gets it.
Yeah. Well, it's a very easy way to quantify how good a player is how many points he gets, right?
It's lazy, isn't it?
It is, but like, people are lazy. I'm lazy. I researched this interview by looking up your Wikipedia page. Like, we're not big researchers on this podcast. If I had a vote,
at least you didn't lead with where in Vancouver were you born?
Yeah, thank God. Yeah, I was thinking, like, I don't think she's from Vancouver, right? Like, she was here for if she was born in Vancouver.
My dad is.
But you are not.
Does that count? Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what? That counts for half, I guess. Sure.
Okay.
So, JT Miller. Here's what I was thinking about JT Miller, especially last night. You saw Travis Green. He had to really juggle his lines to try and find the space besides Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser. JT Miller may not be, this is a line you can say, and feel free to use this on the next broadcast to make you sound real smart. JT Miller may not be the Canucks' best player, but he might be the most important player.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Feel free to use that on the next broadcast.
See, that's
on the next.
lazy, right? That's the opposite of lazy. That's a good take.
Yeah. Yeah. Again,
take.
Feel free to use that tonight. Next Canucks broadcast. Go ahead.
He and Bo. I'm with you.
Yeah. And JT Miller. Hopefully they can get him back. I was reading. I was reading a report today that it sounds like he hasn't tested positive or anything like that. It's just maybe Jordy Ben has, and they're gonna get him back. I don't think they can travel, right? I think the rules are pretty strict right now. Yeah, you can't.
BC rules, right?
Well, it's BC rules, and it's also the NHL rules. You can't take a commercial flight without quarantine. You can't drive more than 5 hours, I think, without quarantine.
It's not worth it.
So there's literally no way to get him to Calgary, even if you want to. So he's probably coming back for that home opener on Wednesday, right? But no, JT Miller is a very important player for the Vancouver Canucks in terms of the Canucks aren't very deep at the forward position the best of times. So if you lose a guy like JT Miller, you need to really count on guys like Jake Virtanen to step up, and he really didn't do that last night.
No, and this is I feel like it's been 4 solid years probably more than that actually, of question marks surrounding Virtanen. And is this going to be his year?
Yeah.
And right now he has a really good opportunity, and
it's now or never.
Giving it to him, and Benning is giving it to him. Yeah. This is it.
Yeah, and
but again, this is the year where you need the depth. You're gonna need to count on guys, and I'm sure COVID is going to rear its ugly head throughout the season to every team. So in that aspect, it's what was Sheldon Keefe of the Leafs saying? He said it was what Steve Nash was saying in Brooklyn. They weren't calling it the taxi squad. It was something, I think I'm paraphrasing, but they said the Be Ready squad.
Did Kyrie Irving come up with that?
Oh gosh, I hope not. Yeah, I can't stand the Nets, but that's a story for another day. But for all the guys on the roster, whether you're on the taxi squad or not, it's the be ready and prove yourself this year, because now's the time in this division with this many games when they're going to need you. You better show up. Yeah, that's where Thatcher Demko was good in his first start. He showed up. He is not going to be as good as he was in the playoffs. To me, that's the best he'll be. So if you can get him in and he makes a few big saves, I'd be happy with that. Well, and it's also Connor McDavid.
Yeah, he got the raw end. He got the short end of the stick, I think, last night on it with a second half of a back-to-back with a tired team.
Yeah.
So
Connor McDavid being pointless the night before.
Yeah, Connor McDavid, doing the Michael Jordan meme, and I took that personally after, Canucks Twitter just slandering him. We messed up. We talked too much shit. Kyle Bowen, who does the post-game show for the network, sipping on a 40 because everyone in Vancouver is drunk on Elias Pettersson. He said it, and I agree with him completely that we talk too much shit about Connor McDavid. He read the receipts. He has a burner on Twitter like Kevin Durant, and he saw us talking shit, and he said, you know what? I'm going to score a hat trick. Fuck you guys.
It was his birthday, too, when he was pointless, so he was probably even...
more mad. He went back to his home that looks like a Dr. Evil's lair. Just sit back. That's all he was thinking about the last 20 hours.
No one should have talked trash in Vancouver about his fancy home.
Yeah, no, yeah. But if you have that much money, you can make whatever kind of house you want. I'm not gonna. I was not one to talk shit about Connor McDavid's home. Let's just have that on the record.
I was not either.
Yeah.
I have different styling preferences, I will say, but I really liked his wine fridge.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not a big wine guy, but it looked impressive. So
yeah.
Here's something I was thinking about watching hockey yesterday. I was watching Washington and Buffalo on Sportsnet. How is Sportsnet going to cover, teams outside the North Division? Because I'm sure for you guys, it's going to be very, very easy to just put Canadian matchups each and every night. And sure, everyone's going to eat it up. But there's also other matchups out there. I have a sports gambling show called It's Free Money. I need to be able to watch these other games. I need to be able to see if my bets are gonna happen.
Yeah. No, so that was even a conversation that we had and our bosses preached to heading into the season, and even just within our partnership of the NHL. It's we are obviously, and most of the time our network and TSN focuses on the Canadian teams, but we need to make sure this year more than ever that we're not ignoring other games that are going on.
Yeah.
In terms of, and this isn't my department, but in terms of scheduling and putting games on different networks, it just depends on the evening. Like tonight, the only Canadian matchup is Leafs and Sens, and that's a TSN game. So that means Sportsnet will have
perfect
US
I will make sure to gamble on all those games tonight. That's how it works.
And for us, that's our responsibility of like the shows we do and intermissions, that we also focus on US matchups.
Yes.
And that's where, even for me personally, when we're doing regional games, so like a Vancouver broadcast or Oilers or Flames, is like, we even question ourselves, if we have a panel in that city, like, do we from the studio in Toronto want to focus on the game we're watching, or do we want to try and update people on what's going on around the league? But that's where I'm lucky having the Hockey Central show, because we can just do both. Like tonight on the show, we'll have Kyle Bukauskas in Ottawa, and Chris Johnson will come by to talk about COVID protocols and just across the NHL. Chris Versteeg's on, so like he's going to be making some comparisons of Marian Hossa, and not to give stuff away, but some faces that he's seen in the league so far this year. Like, we can talk about Crosby, right? And that sweet opening goal. Like, so that, but it's totally on us. Like, we need to check ourselves just to make sure we're covering everything.
Yeah. And speaking of COVID protocol, do you get the sense that the NHL has strict enough protocols in place so we don't have a situation like in the NBA right now? They're having to cancel, games pretty much every night, and it's not at a point where they're gonna have to pause. I read somewhere thinking about they should pause the season. If you learn anything from like NFL, MLB, they're just gonna power through it, and as long as it's only one game getting postponed each night, I think a lot of these leagues are gonna be able to live with it. But do you get a sense that the COVID protocols in the NHL are strong enough that we're not gonna have another Dallas Stars situation, going forward?
No, but I don't think, unless you're in a bubble, you can, because even in a bubble, you can't guarantee that.
Yeah.
Do I think they have strong enough protocols? Yes, in order for them to facilitate the season, but COVID's smarter than all of us, and it's more contagious than we would like to stop. So the tricky part is it's the players, right? It's like all of us at home. When you're given guidelines by the government and by the provinces, are you obeying those guidelines? In Ontario right now, are you staying home unless it's for something essential? Same goes for the players. And that's where it's tough. That's just trust between your management and your players, and the league and its players, is be smart, be cautious and careful. And if you do that, hopefully everything's fine, but that still doesn't even guarantee it. And that's how I feel now, even going in studio. Like, we have strict protocols, but I'm still leaving the house and for a while. So I guess to answer your question, I don't think there's any protocol that can keep COVID
unless you're in a bubble
out.
Yeah, I think that's probably how I feel.
And that was never a realistic option.
No, speaking to Dan Murphy, the players were not interested in
no chance
not having another bubble this season. So I want to get into a bit of your career, but I first got to ask about this commercial Sportsnet constantly plays. the it's on or it's back commercial.
Oh yeah.
And sorry, so for people who are listening to this who don't have cable and aren't subject to this commercial, and I like it, by the way, but I'm just very, very curious. I have so many questions about it. It's essentially, it starts with Elliot Friedman alone at the desk, some like dramatic music plays, and there's a close-up of his phone, and it comes up, it says anonymous source. I just like the fact that he apparently saves all his contacts as an anonymous source. He doesn't have actual names. That's how he keeps them.
By what anonymous source it is.
That's how he,
when he one or two or three.
Well, that's when he writes 31 thoughts. He can actually say an anonymous source. He doesn't actually know who it is. It's just anonymous source. Yeah, he picks it up and he like gets a call like hello, and he turns around and he's like, all right, everybody, it's on. And then you come up, you got like the megaphone. You're like, it's on, everybody,
naturally.
It's on. Yeah. So, did you have any say in what your role would be for that commercial, or like how does this commercial? I have so many questions.
Okay, so no. So for all these commercials, it's done through like a different department.
Okay.
And we get an email saying, hey, we're going to need you in on this day for a promo shoot. And the night before, you get kind of the information. So I saw that my line was it's on, which personally I'm like, great, I can remember that. And then It said that I run in with a megaphone, and I was a little worried. And then when I went in and I was doing it, I thought that it could really be cringeworthy, but it's not as cringeworthy as I thought it would be. So yeah.
So
it plays a lot though.
Did you ad
lib
lib
that
that
megaphone?
Yeah. Did you ad lib the everybody it's on part?
I actually, maybe that was in the script. Maybe I lied. Maybe it was everybody it's on.
It's on everybody it's on. Yeah, that's. Yeah. So you were you able to do the Jeff Merrick like shooting on the net, or
no, they were in there before though. Yeah, Merrick was in right before me because it was like one person in at a time because of COVID. And I'd already been told that Anthony broke a monitor and Jeff hit and broke something.
Oh geez.
So I thought it actually I'm like, okay, I'm not going to break the megaphone, I don't think so.
So
it's still playing though. I thought
it's on all the time. If you have Sportsnet, they play it. They still play it. Like hockey is on, but maybe it may. You know what? I don't mind the commercial. Like I'm just very curious about the process behind it. Like when was it? When did you guys like film it? Like a couple months ago?
Yeah. If I had to guess, November.
Okay.
November. Yeah.
Nice. Another question about the panel. Can you assure me that Brian Burke is as grumpy off air as he seems on air? I don't want to ruin the Brian Burke aura that he's just grumpy all the time.
Brian Burke is one of my favorite people I've ever worked with because he is very, I think, misunderstood. He is grumpy, but he's not I'm trying to make a comparison. Like, people who are grumpy and they're just miserable to be around and they're like, the world sucks and I don't want to be. Yeah. He's not grumpy like that. It's just that it's really hard to make him laugh, and he's just got the greatest poker face of all time. But he's a very thoughtful man, and he has a great memory. Like if he remembers things about individuals and their family, he's very giving. But he's just like, it makes me laugh. Even when I was watching on Wednesday, like the panel with Berkey, like BX and everyone's laughing and Berkey's
does not crack a smile at all.
No, it's really hard to get him.
Yeah.
But he's great. He's very misunderstood, like big family man. He's very intelligent and very smart, and he can talk about a lot of things. And what's nice and refreshing is he does so in a very, inclusive way. Like he's not condescending in terms of I know all this and you don't. It's because he's an avid learner and he just loves talking to people and learning new things.
Does he what are his thoughts on the season so far? Like was he a fan of the Canadian division when it first came up?
I'm not sure. I don't know if he was a fan of the Canadian division or not. Last time I spoke to him was on Wednesday when we were all working that night, which was pretty, it was pretty busy. Yeah. I'm trying to think of just conversations I've had with him. Like he thinks Montreal is going to win the division.
No chance. I'm sorry. No chance.
Which I think he also just had fun saying on opening night when a lot of Leafs fans were watching. I think that was fun for him.
Yeah.
He seems into it. I think he's just happy that there's hockey back, and it's good for the league. It's good for fans. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I have any Brian Burke hot takes of late, but I don't.
Yeah, that's very surprising for someone like Brian Burke.
Well, because when I was sitting next to him, like during commercials on Wednesday, we weren't talking about hockey. We were just talking about like his girls, his daughters.
Yes.
And,
yeah. Well, I just finished reading it. I just finished reading his book, and obviously you went to Harvard Law School. Like he's obviously you gotta be pretty smart to go into a place like that. Again, we mentioned earlier we had Dan Murphy on last week's episode of Power of Talent. I had to ask him about Kevin Bieksa because he has a relationship with Kevin Bieksa, and I think as someone who grew up watching those Canucks, you could just tell like Kevin Bieksa was a very personable guy. He used to mess around with Dan Murphy. Very different than hockey players were back then, and kind of still are. Like, have you been surprised by the rise of Kevin Bieksa? Because I think not only is he entertaining, he's also very good at breaking down the game, which is hard, as you know, in television, because it's not like this where I can just ramble as long as I want and no one's going to tell me to stop. You have, 45 seconds or however long the producer gives you to break down a clip.
He's just naturally very talented. Like he's one of those guys who just sat in front of a camera for the first time and was totally fine.
Yeah.
And that's because he's a really confident guy. He's charismatic and he's also a smart ass. And that's why people like him on TV and why he's so good. Because you can't let your guard down with him or else he'll just get you and make you look like a idiot or make fun of you. In terms of his analysis, that's why he's been so good. It's not just his personality. It's that he's giving like the details of the game that us as fans would not pick up on. Like it's things that only a player would pick up on. And I don't know why for him it was just so easy. I think it's just natural talent. And he was also one of those guys who wasn't shy or afraid to show his personality. So I think that's just where that confidence came from. Because the NHL is still very much, it's unlike the NBA.
Yes.
Where guys are still worried to be more than the team, right?
Yeah.
Or be goofy that's why Nate Schmidt in Vancouver is great. Like,
as a goofball.
What a fun guy. Yeah. Like who doesn't like a goofball?
Do you think that changes in the next 5 years? We see more personality out of these players like we do in the NBA, or is it hockey still going to be, the team first?
I think it's always going to be that way. And I think it's also, and I'm generalizing here, but I think it's kind of for a good Canadian boy, like you're modest and hockey's about the team. It's not about the individual. And unlike other sports, a superstar can't take over as much
as we're seeing with the Edmonton Oilers
sport like baseball or basketball. I also think it's the media's responsibility too, in terms of guys, like, especially in Toronto, like guys don't want to say too much because they don't want their words to be used against them, or that's the headline, right? Like even broadcasters worry about that. Like I find former players, they're worried as they come into broadcasting. Like if I say something, it could be a headline, even though wasn't the full 3-minute thing I said. It was just 10 seconds. So I think that's also the media's and our responsibility to make it safer. That doesn't mean you're not held accountable for what you say and your opinions, but within reason, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't want clickbait.
Oh, absolutely. So what made you decide to get into sports broadcasting? What was your, I want to do this moment?
Yeah, I was always the athlete of the family and loved playing and watching sports. Yes. Like I watched sports all the time growing up. And the rest of my family didn't even watch as many sports as I did. Like I would just
you just go watch games by yourself?
Watch Raptors games and that. And then like Saturday nights I'd always watch, but it was probably around like grade 8 or 9, like even early in high school, I realized I really liked talking to people and hearing people's stories. And I was very curious, and I'm the youngest. I have 2 older brothers, and we were always as a family just very, very in the know as to what's going on in the world and current affairs and watching the news. So I thought about journalism, and then just my love of sports, putting the two together kind of made sense. So luckily it's worked out. Yeah,
absolutely. And so you were here in Vancouver 2 years, and then you moved back, right?
Yeah.
So why do you hate Vancouver? Like what was it about Vancouver that just appalled you so much you had to go back to Toronto?
I moved back to Toronto because they shut down the production in Vancouver.
Yeah. So you told them to shut down the production.
No, trust me, I didn't. Because I only had 3, like from the day we found out, it turned out our last show was the night before. And then we got told, and then I had to be back within 3 weeks. So didn't have to be back, but I made the decision because I wanted to keep a job at Sportsnet. So to move back to Toronto. So it was a good run though. It was so great.
Yeah, I think a lot of people miss you out here in terms of that local show. Like that's missing in a lot of markets. And I get the money is probably going to make it so that doesn't happen again, but people do miss it out here. People do miss like a local West Coast show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Toronto, do you find it, easier to cover a lot of these teams from Toronto? Is that like the big appeal for broadcasts out there?
In terms of, do you mean like NHL
broadcasts?
Yeah. Or, it's actually harder because if I was in like for doing Canucks, Oilers, and Flames, ideally I would be in all three of those cities because then you can actually talk to the guys.
Yeah.
This year's actually been the best for me because everything's on Zoom. I never used to from Toronto be able to be in like a scrum after a practice. I mean, you still can't talk to guys in the room off camera, which is always where you get your best stuff. That's where traveling and doing some rinkside for Hockey Night in Canada the past couple of years has been nice because then you can actually see people face to face, and especially in cities where there's not as many media around. So yeah, it's kind of like anything in 2021 and looking back to 2020, you just kind of adjust, and that's how things are done. And you text people and ask questions of people in each market too, and stay in touch with people just to make sure you have updated information. But no, ideally I'd be able to be in every rink every day, but it's not possible.
Yeah. So one question I really wanted to ask you is about representation on these national broadcasts. Like obviously we had yourself and Jennifer Broderell on yesterday's broadcast. We're recording this on Friday, by the way. So the Thursday night game against the Oilers was you, Jennifer Broderell, and Colby Armstrong at some points. And there's been a big push recently, I think, to have more representation on these national broadcasts. And I think a lot of it is because, again, I'm on your Wikipedia page right now. It says you're 30 years old.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's correct, but I'm not going to.
That is correct.
Okay, perfect. I'm 26, and I think a large part of it is because there's been an expectation from our generation that, you know, young girls, young women play sports that didn't exist before. Right? Like I think of someone like my mom. She's a big hockey fan, but she's turning 62 in a couple weeks, and then she didn't really play sports growing up because not only was there really no expectation for young girls and women to play sports, but also the infrastructure wasn't there. There wasn't, you know, the leagues to play hockey or soccer or whatever you wanted to play back when she was a kid. And I think, you know, people of our generation are growing up and seeing like, there's no one who looks like me on these broadcasts. So
yeah,
how do we change this going forward? I know that's a heavy question, and I'm sure you get asked that a lot, but
it's also
it's a question that needs,
Yeah, like representation is the most important thing in terms of growing. And let's just speak about sports and hockey, for instance, in terms of growing the game, making it a comfortable space for everyone. And in terms of growing the game, it would work to the benefit and does work to the benefit of the game, of the industry, of of everyone involved. And the thing is, like, if I think of me growing up, it really is seeing is believing. If you don't see people in certain positions, then you don't know that it's possible for yourself. And luckily for me, women ahead of me have paved the way. So I saw Chris Simpson or Martine Geyer on air, and I thought as that kid in grade 8 or grade 9, oh, I can do that, right? Yeah. Whether it's subconscious or not, it's like, oh, she's doing that, so I could do that. I even think of other things in sports I bet you I would have thought was really cool, like trying to be a GM or getting into the business side of things. Those are just things that as a kid, I never thought I could do because I didn't know that was a possibility. Right. And that's sad. Like we do not want generations growing up not knowing that they can do things and that they'll be put in situations to succeed. So representation is, I think, one of the most important things, and it is our responsibility, just as the generation did before us, to keep pushing and make it better for the next generation coming up. So I'm glad to see that there's been better representation on Sportsnet, and it's not just on air. It needs to be behind the scenes. It needs to be management at the table. You need to have different perspectives and faces and voices, and we can still be much better. Like we're getting there, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. And how do you deal with the quote unquote haters? And I know that there's like, I just Googled your name but doing my research.
Are there a lot of haters?
No, it's just like questions. Like I go on Carolyn Cameron and it's like, where did Carolyn Cameron go? And like two of them are asking if you're married. Like that's gotta be like a weird, that's weird. That is kind of gotta be like, as a woman in sports broadcasting, you are held to like standards like this. Like, who the hell cares if you're married or not? Like, are you not gonna watch the broadcast? You're only gonna watch the broadcast if you're not married. Like, it's just like how do you deal with stuff like that? Like, I would never have to. No one's asking me when I have my podcast. Are you married? No.
I know. And unfortunately, you get used to that, which if me saying that shows that there's a problem, because you shouldn't have to get used
Yes.
to weird things. That's where even like people throughout my career have helped me. Because as I mentioned with C-ball, I was about to turn 24 and I was now doing national TV, and I was getting a lot more attention that I wasn't used to on social media.
Yes.
And I found it like creepy and weird. And I didn't like when, like, here I am trying to just do a good job and get better and have a good show. And then there's people commenting on your looks, and like, even if it's in a nice, it's not nice, like a complimentary way, it's still like creepy stuff or sexist stuff. And stuff like that bothered me. And I even remember C-ball after, like, he saw a couple tweets because he was included in them, and he called me and he was like, talked me through, and he's like, don't even worry. So the way I see it, I mean, it's weird and I just try and avoid it, but you can't avoid everything on social media. But I really, to me, it's kind of a wash. Like, really nice things that people say, I mean, that's very nice, but I don't know you. And then mean things that people say, it's like, well, that's not very nice, but I don't know you. So if people compliment my work and say, I really enjoyed this interview and this is why, and I'm like, oh, well, that's okay, that's good. But if people are just creepy or mean or weird, it affects you. So for a second, I'm like, ugh, and then you move on.
Mm. The fourth question. So the questions people also, you know how Google, you say people also ask, it goes, where did Carolyn Cameron go? Who is Carolyn Cameron married to? Is Carolyn Cameron married? And the fourth one is, how tall is Carly Agro? I don't know. Is she tall? Like,
isn't that weird?
5'8".
She's taller than I am.
She's 5. Apparently Google says she's 5'8".
But why does Google have her height? Unless it came from like,
background, spent 2 years at Florida International.
Okay.
Okay, maybe that's probably where she went to college, right?
That does make sense for the height.
Okay, Google's very smart like that.
I know.
So
some would say creepy. I mean, I do have an Alexa in my house, so who knows?
Yeah, that's how they're asking questions about you married.
Yeah, and I was talking so much about Vancouver, so they think I live there or was born there.
Yeah, the AI is filling out Wikipedia now. So let's end this interview with a few Twitter questions, and I only had one. We don't have much online clout, so this is not a rebuke of you. This is just we don't have much online clout.
Murph got a ton of questions coming in, didn't he?
Pardon?
Murph got a ton of questions just pouring in from Twitter when he was on.
He got a few. Murph got a few. So first on, this isn't even a question. This is just a compliment. This is someone who said, quote, she's so good and criminally underutilized. Wish she was on Sportsnet radio in Vancouver. Super fun, makes it look easy, and knows her stuff.
That's very nice.
Yeah. So we'll start with that.
I don't think it's criminal, but I appreciate the support.
Yeah. Why aren't you on Sportsnet radio here more? He's right.
I don't know. I like coming on.
Yeah.
Good. I'm good.
James Cebulski isn't calling you up for radio hits?
No, but that's because I'm sleeping.
Okay, fair. Well,
that doesn't make sense. Why am I getting the time change mixed up?
Yeah, if you truly still like this city, you would make that sacrifice.
It's true.
Now, here's the question.
I do listen to the show. I was listening to it 2 mornings ago.
Perfect. Okay, so you still have your ear to the city. I like that. So this question is from Kyle, the aforementioned Kyle Bound, host of our post-game show, Sipping on a 40. This is a 2-part question. First part, your favorite comedians, and second part, were you a class clown growing up?
Jerry Seinfeld. And I wasn't a class clown in terms of like clowning around and getting in trouble, but I have always been a little bit of a smart ass.
Yeah.
But respectfully so.
Okay, so not much of you were much of a prank person.
I'm not like sticking carrots up my nose.
No, nothing like that.
No.
And I think Kyle does bring up a good point here because you do have sort of a lighthearted, and you do kind of bring, you take it maybe not as serious when you're on the broadcast. And I'm not saying it's like that's a bad thing. Like sometimes,
No, you're right though.
It's good to bring a bit of levity to these broadcasts, right?
Yeah. I'm sarcastic.
Yes.
And I've got a bit of a dry sense of humor. So I also find too, my job at the desk is to make the other analysts shine, or not other analysts, the analysts shine and more comfortable. So I find kind of keeping them on their toes a little bit helps. Like, look at what BX has done in doing that. Like, he brings the best out of other people because they're not expecting the next question. That's where even Brian Burke, I think, is the best. It's not necessarily the first question. It's when he's given a follow-up that he doesn't know is coming. I like to keep people on their toes.
Yeah, you do
kind of a fun game.
You do a very good job of that. Now, the final question is, I was listening to an episode of 31 Thoughts of Podcast. They had like a holiday episode or something like that. It was like 4 hours long, which is, it took a while to get through, but you're eventually on it. And they said you play the ukulele. Is that true?
Yeah.
When did that start? Like, have you always been a musically inclined? Actually. Yeah, have you always been a musically inclined person, or?
Yeah, like I did singing lessons in choir growing up, and I played the trumpet, which is in the basement. And yeah, I taught myself the ukulele starting maybe, I guess, 2014, almost 7 years ago.
Wow.
But I'm not like, honestly, anyone could learn the ukulele.
It's not that hard.
You learn the strumming patterns, everything's on YouTube, and then you just learn like 5 chords and you're good to go.
Okay, because we have, we're here at the Post Up Studios. We have Hamrosh Five God, who's a producer here. So if you want to ever, play a trumpet for a track, play the ukulele, I'm sure we can work something out over Zoom. If you ever want to scratch that musical itch.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Perfect. And so thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Carolyn, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime. This was a lot of fun. Later on in the season when maybe the playoffs are starting to take shape.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Stay safe.